Un hombre encantador, inteligente, aparentemente inofensivo. Así lo describían quienes lo conocieron. Pero detrás de su sonrisa se ocultaba un monstruo, un depredador que aterrorizó a Estados Unidos en la década de 1970. Ted Bundy no solo fue un asesino en serie, fue el asesino que redefinió el horror. Cómo un hombre así pudo engañar a todos, cómo logró seducir a sus víctimas para llevarlas a la muerte. Hoy, en Más allá del crimen, exploraremos la oscura mente de Ted Bundy y el rastro de muerte que dejó a su paso. Theodore Robert Bundy nació el 24 de noviembre de 1946 en Burlington, Vermont. Desde el principio, su vida estuvo marcada por una mentira. Creció creyendo que su madre, Eleanor, era en realidad su hermana y que sus abuelos eran sus verdaderos padres. Esta revelación, que descubrió años después, sacudió su frágil psique. Desde niño, Bundy mostró signos perturbadores. Mientras otros niños jugaban inocentemente, él tenía comportamientos inquietantes. A los 3 años, colocó cuchillos alrededor de la cama de su tía mientras dormía, observándola con una expresión vacía. En la escuela, aunque era un estudiante promedio, mostraba una absoluta falta de empatía y una creciente fascinación por la violencia. Durante la adolescencia, Bundy se convirtió en un joven retraído y solitario. Robaba revistas pornográficas y las escondía bajo su cama. Pasaba horas estudiando crímenes violentos y desarrollando fantasías de dominación y poder sobre las mujeres. Pero nadie sospechaba que ese joven introvertido escondía un lado oscuro, un lado que pronto despertaría. A principios de los años 70, Bundy asistió a la Universidad de Washington, donde estudió psicología. Era carismático, encantador y ambicioso. Incluso trabajó en una línea de ayuda para víctimas de violencia, donde mostraba una empatía fingida que engañaba a todos. Era un hombre con una doble vida, el estudiante ejemplar de día y el cazador de noche. Las desapariciones comenzaron en 1974. Mujeres jóvenes, de cabello largo y oscuro, desaparecían sin dejar rastro. Testigos hablaban de un hombre atractivo, con el brazo enyesado, pidiendo ayuda para cargar su maleta. Nadie imaginaba que ese hombre era Ted Bundy, usando su inteligencia y encanto como un arma mortal. Su modus operandi era meticuloso. Elegía a sus víctimas, las engañaba con su apariencia inofensiva y, una vez a solas, las golpeaba con una palanca antes de llevarlas a su vehículo, un Volkswagen Beetle que se convertiría en su símbolo de terror. Los cuerpos comenzaron a aparecer, horriblemente mutilados. Algunas víctimas jamás fueron encontradas, pero a pesar de las evidencias, la policía no lograba atraparlo. Bundy se creía intocable, y por un tiempo lo fue. En 1975, la suerte de Bundy comenzó a cambiar. Un patrullero lo detuvo por conducir de manera sospechosa, y en su coche se encontraron objetos inquietantes: esposas, una palanca, cinta adhesiva. Aunque no había pruebas directas, la policía comenzó a sospechar que estaban ante un depredador más peligroso de lo que imaginaban. Las investigaciones avanzaban. Una expareja de Bundy lo denunció por su comportamiento extraño. El FBI elaboró su primer perfil criminal basado en patrones de asesinato. El cerco se cerraba, pero Bundy tenía una última carta bajo la manga: su gran escape. La astucia de Ted Bundy no tenía límites. En 1977, logró escapar de la cárcel en Colorado saltando desde una ventana del segundo piso de la biblioteca. Desapareció en el bosque y tras semanas huyendo fue capturado nuevamente, pero esto no lo detendría. En diciembre del mismo año, protagonizó una fuga aún más audaz. Se arrastró por un conducto de ventilación y caminó tranquilamente fuera de la prisión, haciéndose pasar por un visitante. Bundy huyó a Florida, donde retomó su racha asesina. En enero de 1978, irrumpió en la casa de la fraternidad Chi Omega en la Universidad Estatal de Florida y atacó brutalmente a 4 mujeres, matando a 2 de ellas. Solo una semana después, secuestró y asesinó a una niña de 12 años, Kimberly Leach. La policía estaba tras su pista, pero Bundy creía que podía seguir evadiendo la justicia. Su suerte terminó el 15 de febrero de 1978, cuando un oficial de policía lo detuvo en Pensacola por conducir un vehículo robado. Esta vez no habría escapatoria. La evidencia lo vinculaba directamente a los crímenes en Florida. Su tiempo se agotaba. El juicio de Ted Bundy fue un espectáculo mediático sin precedentes. Se representó a sí mismo en la corte, sonriendo a las cámaras y manipulando a la opinión pública. Intentó usar su carisma para convencer al jurado, pero la evidencia era abrumadora. Con testimonios devastadores y pruebas forenses contundentes, Bundy fue declarado culpable y condenado a muerte. Ahora, si habéis llegado hasta aquí, os mostraré un resumen de la última entrevista que concedió Ted Bundy el día antes de ser ejecutado en la silla eléctrica. Podéis observar la enorme sangre fría de la que hace gala, sin mostrar en ningún momento ni un ápice de arrepentimiento. No os la perdáis. Durante sus últimos días, Bundy intentó negociar su ejecución, confesando más crímenes en un intento desesperado por retrasar su destino. En una última entrevista, culpó a la pornografía violenta de haber alimentado sus impulsos asesinos, aunque muchos creen que esto fue otro intento de manipulación. Por cierto, ¿habéis dado ya un me gusta? ¿Y a la campanita? Pues ¿a qué esperáis? Tenemos que petar el canal. Vamos, venga con esa ayudita.
Ted, it is about 2:30 in the afternoon. You are scheduled to be executed tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock if you don't receive another stay. What is going through your mind? What thoughts have you had in these last few days?
Well, I won't kid you to say that it's something that I feel that I am in control of or something that I've come to terms with, because I haven't. It's a moment-by-moment thing. Sometimes I feel very tranquil, and other times I don't feel tranquil at all. What's going through my mind right now is to use the minutes and hours that I have left as fruitfully as possible and see what happens. It helps to live in the moment in the essence that we use it productively.
Abused. You are not emotionally abused.
No way. And that's part of the tragedy of this whole situation is because I grew up in a wonderful home with 2 dedicated and loving parents, and one of 5 brothers and sisters. A home where we as children were the focus of my parents' lives, where we regularly attended church, 2 Christian parents who did not drink, they did not smoke, there was no gambling, there was no physical abuse or fighting in the home. I'm not saying this was Leave It to Beaver.
It wasn't perfect.
Well, no, I don't know that such a home exists, but it was a fine, solid Christian home, and nobody, I hope no one will try to take the easy way out and to try to blame or otherwise accuse my family of contributing to this, because I know, and I'm trying to tell you as honestly as I know how, what happened, and I think this is a message I want to get across. But as a young boy, and I mean a boy of 13, certainly, that I encountered outside the home again, in the local grocery store, the local drugstore, the softcore pornography, what people call softcore. But as I think I explained to you last night, Dr. Dobson, an anecdote that as young boys do, we explored the back roads and sideways and byways of our neighborhood, and oftentimes people would dump the garbage and whatever they were cleaning out of their house, and from time to time we'd come across pornographic books of a harder nature than more graphic, you might say, more explicit nature than we would encounter, let's say, in your life, and realize what I had done. And with a clear mind and all my essential moral and ethical feelings intact at that moment, absolutely horrified that I was capable of doing something like that.
You really hadn't known that before?
There is just absolutely no way to describe, first, the brutal urge to do that kind of thing, and then what happens is once it has been more or less satisfied and recedes, you might say, or spent, that sense, that kind of energy level recedes, and basically I became myself again. I want people to understand this too, and I'm not saying this gratuitously because it's important people understand this. That basically I was a normal person. I wasn't some guy hanging out at bars or a bum, or I wasn't a pervert in the sense that, people look at somebody and say, I know there's something wrong with him, and just tell. I mean, I was essentially a normal person. I had good friends. I led a normal life, except for this one small but very potent, very destructive segment of it that I kept very secret, very close to myself, and didn't let anybody know about it. And part of the shock and horror for my dear friends and family years ago when I was first arrested was that there was no clue. They looked at me and they looked at the all-American boy. And I wasn't perfect, but I want to be quite candid with you. I was okay. Okay, I was. The basic humanity and basic spirit that God gave me was intact, but unfortunately it became overwhelmed at times. I think people need to recognize that it's not some kind of those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular pornographic violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands. And we grew up in regular families, and pornography can reach out and snatch a kid out of any house today. He snatched me out of my home. It snatched me out of my home 20, 30 years ago. And as diligent as my parents were, and they were diligent in protecting their children, and as good a Christian home as we had, and we had a wonderful Christian home, there is no protection against the kinds of influences that are loose in the society that tolerates.
You feel this really deeply, don't you? I'm here from California because you had something you wanted to say. This hour that we have together is not just an interview with a man who's scheduled to die tomorrow morning. I am here and you're here because of this message that you're talking about right here. You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore pornography, is doing untold damage to other people killed the way you did others.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now. And I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
That's true.
And it's real. It's true.
Ted, what would your life have been like without that influence? You can only speculate.
Yeah. Well, I know it would have been far better, not just for me, and it's, excuse me for being so self-centered here. It would have been a lot better for me and lots of other people. I know that, lots of other innocent people, victims and families. It would have been a lot better. There's no question but that it would have been a fuller life, certainly a life that would not have involved, I'm absolutely certain, would not have involved this kind of violence that I have committed.
I'm sure, Ted, if I were able to ask you the questions that are being asked out there, who are so wounded, years later, their lives have not returned to normal. They will never return to normal.
Absolutely. But through God's help, I have been able, much too late, but better late than never, feel the hurt and the pain that I am responsible for. Yes, absolutely. In the past few days, myself and a number of investigators have been talking about unsolved cases, murders that I was involved in. And it's hard to talk about all these years later because it revives in me all those terrible feelings and those thoughts that I have steadfastly and diligently dealt with, and I think successfully, with the love of God. And yet it's reopened that, and I felt the pain and I felt the horror again of all that. And I can only hope that those who I have harmed, and those who I've caused so much grief, but I'll tell you, there are lots of other kids playing in streets around this country today who are going to be dead tomorrow and the next day and the next day and next month because other young people are reading the kinds of things and seeing the kinds of things that are available in the media today.
Ted, as you would imagine, there's tremendous cynicism about you on the outside, and I suppose for good reason. I'm not sure that there's anything that you could say that people would believe. Some people would believe.
Yeah.
And yet, you told me last night, and I have heard this through our mutual friend John Tanner, that you have accepted the forgiveness of Jesus Christ and are a follower. Do you draw strength from that as you approach these final hours?
Accustomed to, and that I'm strong and nothing's bothering me. Listen, it's no fun. It gets kind of lonely, and yet I have to remind myself that every one of us will go through this someday, in one way or another, and countless millions who have walked this earth before us have. So this is just an experience which we all share, and
yeah,
here I am.
El 24 de enero de 1989 fue ejecutado en la silla eléctrica en la prisión estatal de Florida. Sus últimas palabras fueron un susurro sin remordimiento. Afuera, la multitud celebraba su muerte con pancartas y fuegos artificiales. El reinado del terror de Bundy había terminado, pero su legado oscuro sigue aterrorizando al mundo. Si te ha interesado este caso, no olvides suscribirte a Más Allá del Crimen. Déjanos tu comentario y tu opinión sobre Bundy. Nos vemos en el próximo episodio.